We live in an age when the redemptive plan of God is transforming human life and shaping the evolving ecosystem of the entire planet at a rate unimaginable even a generation ago. Yet humanity as a whole remains largely unaware of the source of its upheaval, the world-shaping energies of the eternal covenant of God, infused into the world with the appearance of the manifestation of God for this age. Energies which were to be channeled through the center of the covenant, the mystery of God, who bequeathed to us in the tablets of the divine plan our destined role in this great enterprise. This divine plan has unfolded through a series of global plans under the guidance of Shoghi Effendi and later by the Universal House of Justice. These systematic plans produced great victories for the cause, guiding the efforts of the Baha'i community through the first 7 decades of the formative age. Through the rapid worldwide expansion of the faith, the growth and consolidation of its institutions, and renewed persecutions in the land of its birth, the Baha'i community developed towards its gradual emergence from obscurity and onto the world stage with the centennial celebration of the inauguration of the Covenant of Baha'u'llah in New York City in November 1992.
Moscow, Russia, are you with us?
It was a high point in a year-long pause to commemorate the centenary of the ascension of Baha'u'llah and to reflect on the life of the most precious being ever to have drawn breath on this planet. At Rizwan, the Baha'i community concluded the Holy Year with the launching of the 3-year plan at the International Convention.
In my mind that we Baha'is have got the capacity to move the world.
This brief period, the shortest of plans yet inaugurated, concluded at Rizwan 1996. While a full evaluation of its significance will only become clear with the passage of time, this plan certainly occupies a pivotal position as the faith marches forward toward the new millennium, confident that an increasingly disillusioned and strangely distracted world is steadily approaching the recognition of its path towards peace and true prosperity.
The 3-year plan is the second stage in the unfoldment of the 4th epoch of the formative age. One of its most distinguishing features is the devolution of planning to national and local levels.
Each National Assembly arriving at the 7th International Baha'i Convention had formed its own plan for action within the common framework of broad integrative themes set forth by the Universal House of Justice. The National Spiritual Assembly of the United States formed the plan for the American Baha'i community and launched it in conjunction with celebrations of the centenary of the establishment of the faith in North America. The National Teaching Committee called for local plans, providing encouragement and assistance to local assemblies in their planning process. The results of the effort to extend the systematic planning down to the grassroots have been substantial. The number of local plans submitted to the National Teaching Committee grew from 162 in 1991 to 867 during the 3-year plan.
In its 1993 Rizwan message, the Universal House of Justice announced that the 3-year plan would revolve around a triple theme: enhancing the vitality of the faith of individual believers, greatly developing the human resources of the cause, and fostering the proper functioning of the local and national Baha'i institutions.
The planning process is critical to the first theme, enhancing the vitality of the faith. For it is in the execution of these plans that the community creates the intersection between the spiritual and material worlds, between the writings and the plane of human action through which the world is transformed.
At the core of every plan is the systematic effort to foster the spread of the faith as outlined in the tablets of the divine plan.
The 3-year plan contained the challenging goal of 2,000 international pioneers and traveling teachers. The Friends responded to this challenge, and the goal was won in the first year of the plan. Never have so many American Baha'is arisen to serve internationally in a single year, surpassing the outpouring of entire plans in the past.
In addition, 500 home front pioneers settled in goal areas during the first 14 months of the plan. By the end of the plan, more than 5,100 American Baha'is had arisen in international service to the cause. A second major theme of the plan was the development of human resources. The National Teacher Training Center began operating at the Llewellyn School, beginning the implementation phase of the core curriculum. 135 teacher trainers have been given the tools needed to provide core curriculum training to more than 1,000 teachers serving in about 500 schools all over the U.S. and in several other countries. The Army of Light helped mobilize youth and organize training programs. The Wilmette Institute was formed during the final year of the plan to provide the educational foundations for effective Baha'i teaching. And the Office of Public Information provided training for hundreds of local public information officers. Brilliant Star flourished as well, developing a new format and contributing its share to the goal-directed effort to raise the first generation of children free from prejudice. Parent facilitators, race unity liaisons, the Institute for Baha'i Studies, and programs at the permanent schools and institutes all work to develop human resources during the plan. The third theme was fostering the maturation of national and local assemblies. More than 100 local assemblies took part in the spiritual assembly development programs developed by the National Assembly and presented by the auxiliary board members and their assistants. In March 1994, the National Spiritual Assembly sought the guidance of the Supreme Body in an unprecedented series of meetings in the Holy Land. The response of the Universal House of Justice came in the form of a letter dated May 19, 1994, providing a focal point for intense study, consultation, and action by the National Spiritual Assembly. The letter was immediately published in its entirety and was made the object of study at summer schools, institutes, and conferences. The National Spiritual Assembly initiated frequent meetings with the counselors, launched staff development programs and internal restructuring at the National Center, reorganized reporting to National Convention, and took further steps toward decentralization. Local spiritual assemblies took important steps forward in their capacity to organize and encourage teaching projects. Youth projects reported to the National Teaching Office multiplied from 25 to 250, all under the sponsorship of local spiritual assemblies. Baha'i youth workshops seem to be springing up everywhere, increasing from 40 to 78. The trademark street performances developed greater variety and were carried to more and more venues, including the closing ceremonies of the NGO Forum in Beijing. In several cities, the youth workshops have been recognized as a significant force for racial unity and as role models for young citizens. Two national youth conferences, Phoenix in 1994 and Dallas in 1995, called on youth to plan a life of service. The response was evident in a 300% growth in the Youth Service Corps. The complex organization and execution of these large gatherings was made possible by an army of more than 300 volunteers, part of a larger national strategy to increase the use of volunteers in all areas of activity. The Office of Human Resources estimates that several thousand volunteers contributed $10 million in services during the 3-year plan.
During the first year of the plan, the old network of district teaching committees was dismantled. For years and years, these committees were the real backbone of Baha'i administration in many areas. but their elimination was designed to help stimulate the further growth and maturation of the local assemblies. During year 2, we formed 10 state teaching committees. This was an interim measure inasmuch as we just did not have the resources to accomplish our goal of establishing 4 regional committees in the areas defined by Abdu'l-Baha in the tablets of the Divine Plan. What we learned from this experience will help us as we now establish the 4 regional committees, the next step in decentralizing the administration of teaching.
Using the recently published compilation of the Universal House of Justice as a guide, a number of innovative communities launched bold efforts aimed at bringing large numbers of new believers into the cause of God. In 1912, Abdu'l-Baha stated that the first stage of the establishment of universal peace, the inauguration of what he called the lesser peace, would come about before the end of this century.
A quarter century later, Shoghi Effendi wrote that the appearance of the lesser peace would synchronize with 2 other important processes occurring independently inside the Baha'i community: the maturation of the national and local institutions of the faith, and the completion of the edifices housing the international institutions of the faith on Mount Carmel. So you see, when taken together, these 2 statements, one by Abdu'l-Baha and one by Shoghi Effendi, portend changes of tremendous significance during these closing years of the century.
The world has been moving in unpredictable and chaotic turns toward the lesser peace, while other events played a role in a community gradually coming of age. All the while, the eyes of the entire Baha'i world looked expectantly to Mount Carmel. Construction began on the Archives Extension Building and the Center for the Study of the Sacred Texts. Excavations began at the site of the International Teaching Center, and the material from the site was used to begin sculpting the upper terraces on the mountain. Thousands of tons of rock and concrete were used to reshape the mountainside, until at last it could begin to receive the covering of trees, flowers, and grass, bringing the new gardens to life and attracting the attention of everyone in the city. During the closing year of the plan, Phase 6, the lowering of Hatzionot Avenue and construction of terraces number 10 and 11, was finally begun, as well as the 7th and final phase, construction of terraces 1 and 2 at the base of the mountain. As the 4-year plan begins, interior finishing work is moving ahead rapidly at the Center for the Study of the Texts and the Archives Extension Building. Crates containing cut marble for these buildings have arrived on the site, and installation will begin in the opening weeks of the new plan. At the site of the International Teaching Center, construction has now reached level 3 of the 9 levels, and steady progress is visible all along the 1-kilometer expanse of the terraces. These monumental developments required an unprecedented outpouring of funds, $75 million during the course of the plan. It was against this backdrop that the National Spiritual Assembly announced the goals of the 3-year plan, including the objective of strengthening the financial position of the national community. The first year of the plan saw a serious financial crisis as the rapidly growing needs outstripped the flow of contributions.
Growth is too slow. We cannot meet the financial obligations of this community as we currently have them, not even talking about new ones. Nor can we respond to the needs of the House of Justice in our current condition. That, in essence, is the crisis.
The National Spiritual Assembly responded by launching the Vision in Action campaign, directing the attention of the community to a new level of consecration and sacrifice.
It is unity that will distinguish us in this process.
Meanwhile, the Assembly began a process of reorganization aimed at achieving higher levels of efficiency and productivity, cutting back in many places while pushing ahead in key areas where the future health of the community was at stake. The community responded at the grassroots with a wonderfully diverse mixture of efforts.
The campaign of Glorious Privilege stimulated individual giving nationwide, and record numbers of local spiritual assemblies supported the National Fund. With these higher levels of participation, many important results have been achieved.
The preservation of the house of worship was further enhanced after modern computerized methods of stress analysis suggested the need to install a reinforcing belt of steel to strengthen and stabilize the central cylindrical core of the building. A new elevator provides access for those unable to climb the stairs, and a full-time office for the long-term preservation of this precious building has been established. Baha'is in the Northeast joyfully welcome completion of the meticulous restoration of the Sarah Farmer Inn and commenced remodeling of the Ole Bull Cottage at Green Acre, preserving a priceless heritage of the community and setting the stage for the further growth and extension of the school's activities. Construction of new broadcasting facilities began at WLGI to enable the station to move out of the dilapidated trailer that long served as an interim home. Baha'is in the area are contributing much of the labor, greatly reducing the cost of construction. At the Lou Helen School, the dining room was enlarged and extensive work was done to beautify the school environment, adding artistic richness and increased functionality. Propelled by local initiative, the Bosch School is completing construction of a new classroom building, while at the Native American Baha'i Institute, increased use by Baha'is as well as university programs required the development of additional dormitory space. 14 surplus properties were sold, generating an additional $525,000. In May of 1995, the Universal House of Justice sent Mr. Ali Nakjavani on a mission that helped the community to understand more fully the realities of the age and to rise to the challenges before it.
It's a crumbling order that we are watching before our eyes. And what are we building on Mount Carmel? We are building institutions to support the supreme body of the faith. A body which Shoghi Effendi says will be the last refuge of a tottering civilization. That's what we are trying to create on Mount Carmel. And this is the destiny, this is the privilege of our generation, to be able to contribute towards this historic project.
The immediate result? Pledges to provide the $40 million in funds required to maintain the work on Mount Carmel without interruption or delay.
With the tremendous sacrifice required to keep the ARC projects on schedule, we naturally wondered what would happen to the National Fund. As it turned out, not only were we able to help meet the needs of the ARC projects, but contributions to all of the other funds, including the National Fund, actually went up during the months following Mr. Nakjavani's visit.
Through careful planning, monitoring, and continued postponement of $5 million in capital projects, we lowered expenses even further. This enabled us to reduce our debt by about $1.5 million and avoid a deeper crisis.
For years, the National Fund has been struggling with chronic deficits, which have diminished our capacity to develop in many important areas. Staff levels at the National Center fell further during the 3-year plan and remain below those of a decade ago as fewer people do more work and volunteers help pick up the slack. Relieving the National Spiritual Assembly from the burden of this tremendous financial pressure is a goal that has yet to be achieved. Still, at the conclusion of the plan, the American Baha'i community can rejoice in having successfully upheld its ongoing duties to the great projects on Mount Carmel, while sustaining the financial base of the faith in the United States. Total contributions to national and international funds were up more than 50% over the previous 3 years, reaching an impressive crescendo of more than $30 million in the final year. This achievement is without a doubt one of the greatest victories of the plan. Following the World Congress, the National Spiritual Assembly worked for 3 years to fully discharge its responsibilities to the Universal House of Justice and to the Baha'is of the world as financial stewards of this most complex and miraculous event. Coordinating arrangements for tens of thousands of people from all over the planet was a task of unprecedented proportions. Though disputes and problems were statistically small for an event of this size, there were still hundreds of problems to be resolved with hotels, vendors, and Congress attendees. Most of the hotels and travel agencies concurred that the quality of data compiled by the Congress office was superior to their own, and the reconciliation generated a $340,000 reduction in costs billed to the Congress. 586 individual travel and hotel-related problems were resolved, and the full audited report was sent to the Universal House of Justice.
Come join the Children's March for Unity. Here we are.
The vitality of the American Baha'i community is evident in a wide range of activities. None of these is more important than the establishment of race unity. Calling All Colors became a rallying cry for Baha'i children who organized and participated in activities promoting racial harmony. Communities nationwide used Race Unity Day and the Martin Luther King National Holiday to proclaim the oneness of humankind and to champion the elimination of prejudice. Recognition of the Baha'i commitment is reflected in the appointments of Carol Miller and Robert Henderson to the Martin Luther King Federal Holiday Commission, and in invitations to the Secretary General to present the Baha'i vision of race unity to federal, state, and trial court officials at the annual conference of the National Center for State Courts, and to the 250 participants in the Wisconsin State Judicial Conference.
But the fundamental work of race unity is community building, creating models of unity, beacons of hope for millions who increasingly despair of ever finding meaningful solutions to continuing racial injustice. The Baha'is of Atlanta have set a wonderful example with their establishment of the Baha'i Unity Center in South DeKalb. The center has rapidly become the focal point for teaching, race unity, community service, and development activities.
Baha'is from many communities contributed their efforts to renovate the former church property. The first stage of remodeling was accomplished in just 2 months, and this new Baha'i Community Center was dedicated at Rezvan 1995. Spiritual meetings for worship and sharing the Baha'i teachings are held every Sunday morning. With the assistance of Mataheta Development Services, a series of community service projects have been launched, including after-school tutoring programs in basic academic skills, arts and music, drama, recreational, and sports activities for area youth.
In this way, we hope to get kids into the learning mode and also teach teachers how to teach, because the basic principle by which we teach then should be the teaching of love.
While in the society at large, the gulf between races remains wide, leaders of thought are increasingly recognizing the distinctiveness and importance of the Baha'i model.
I think it's the kind of philosophy that will catch on when people begin to realize that it works. And it's much better being unified and not having to be concerned about racial issues. One leads a better life, makes more progress. I think it's important to continue what the Baha'is have undertaken.
Anyone who wants a better tomorrow, stand up and say yes. Stand up and say yes. Dig down deep. Do
The question of gender equality was an active topic of reflection, research, consultation, and action during the three-year plan. New scholarly contributions appeared at conferences and in the pages of World Order magazine. American Baha'i involvement in the wider discussion on equality emerged in dramatic fashion at the Fourth United Nations Conference on Women in Beijing. Scores of American Baha'is participated in activities of the conference and in the associated NGO forum. This involvement has resulted in a multitude of opportunities to demonstrate leadership, stimulate discussion, and share Baha'i perspectives in hundreds of local communities nationwide. In a complementary initiative, the National Spiritual Assembly, through the Washington Secretariat for External Affairs, began to organize, together with Amnesty International, a nationwide effort to ratify the UN Convention on the Elimination of Prejudice Against Women, a critical action step necessary to honor the governmental commitments initiated 15 years ago and reaffirmed during the historic conference in Beijing. The work of external affairs grew in its scope and intensity during the three-year plan, with the defense of the Baha'is in Iran as the top priority concern. On April 19, 1994, the United States House of Representatives voted 414-0 in favor of Senate Concurrent Resolution 31, the sixth joint resolution of Congress calling for an end to the persecution of the Iranian Baha'i community, culminating a year which began with the public condemnation of Iran's actions by the President of the United States. In appreciation of these humanitarian efforts, the National Spiritual Assembly hosted a congressional reception on Capitol Hill.
This commitment to human rights, we hope, will become evident in a future world where lexicographers will have relegated the word genocide to the archaic, not to be used in present society, and which the rights and the privileges of all human beings will be upheld and recognized as a part of the human heritage.
The special exhibition erected in the rotunda of the Cannon Congressional Office Building was moved to Foundation Hall in the Baha'i House of Worship in Wilmette to be viewed by the hundreds of thousands of visitors who come each year. As the plan came to a close, a seventh resolution was working its way through Congress.
The importance of external affairs work was demonstrated once again recently. An Iranian Baha'i, Mr. Mahrami, was arrested, tried for apostasy, and condemned to death. The protests that this sentence evoked throughout the world compelled the Iranian government to set the sentence aside. Mr. Mahrami is alive, and we hope that no harm will come to him.
A wide range of other activities developed in the context of the four strategic themes advanced by the Universal House of Justice in October 1994. U.S. Baha'i representatives participated in the United Nations World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna, the United Nations Summit on Social Development, and the Fourth United Nations Conference on Women in Beijing. The Office of Public Information was relocated to New York City in order to establish a presence at the center of national and international media. Through the work of the Washington Office of External Affairs, the American Baha'i community has emerged as a national leader in the field of human rights.
The National Spiritual Assembly helped coordinate the activities of numerous national organizations, appealing to the U.S. Senate and the executive branch in support of the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. In May of 1994, National Spiritual Assembly Secretary General Robert Henderson testified in hearings before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, leading to eventual ratification.
The UN Conventions on Torture also won Senate approval during the three-year plan. In the summer of 1995, the National Spiritual Assembly began to assist with the actual implementation of these treaties.
We are coordinating NGO submissions to the U.S. government for its reports on the race and torture conventions. We are working with organizations such as the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and the International Human Rights Law Group to assist in producing the progress reports which each government must file with the United Nations.
Assistance with the settlement of more than 2,500 Iranian refugees still stranded in Pakistan and Turkey is coordinated from one small office in Wilmette, which over more than 15 years has built a strong network of relationships with the State Department, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, with many foreign consulates, and with numerous state and local agencies. The National Spiritual Assembly's office at the UN contributed to the development of major statements by the Baha'i international community, the prosperity of humankind, and a turning point for all nations.
These are all very important international initiatives. And here at the National Assembly's United Nations office, we are keenly aware that our ability to function as a non-governmental organization is dependent on a bedrock of Baha'i activities at the local level. These activities could range from celebrating United Nations days, supporting local chapters of the United Nations Association, and participating at national and international initiatives in support of the United Nations.
In less than 150 years, it has become the second most widespread religion on the planet. The Baha'is come from virtually every race, nation, religion, and creed.
Use of local media increased during the plan, and communities demonstrated growing capacities for leadership in the fields of race unity and interfaith relations. In the UN 50 commemorations in San Francisco and the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago, local Baha'is were centrally involved in planning events of international significance. The steady increase in the number of Baha'is from Southeast Asian backgrounds is one of the most notable demographic trends of the three-year plan. In Fall River, Massachusetts, a city of more than 50,000, 8 members of the local spiritual assembly are of Cambodian origin. During the three-year plan, the number of American Baha'is of Southeast Asian backgrounds grew by 25% to about 10,000 believers. Most have come to America as refugees from Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Some, like Lao Chu Cha, the traditional clan leader of 10,000 Hmong farmers in Central California, are second-generation Baha'is. Others became Baha'is during long years in refugee camps. Still others, including professionals like Dr. Chu Chang, enrolled in the faith after coming to the U.S.
We are the leaf of one branch and the fruit of one tree. Doesn't matter you're black, white, yellow, Asian. We are the same human race, and we need to love each other, help each other, share what you think is best, and share what we thought that is good for us. And maybe when we learn from each other, this will lead us to the next century and live peaceful with each other.
An estimated 1,500 Southeast Asian immigrants have embraced the faith in America during the three-year plan, making this the fastest-growing segment of the American Baha'i community. Within the National Baha'i Administration, reorganization and decentralization were central themes of the plan. Committees, offices, and agencies underwent careful review. The Baha'i Publishing Trust was reorganized into a larger, more decentralized publishing organization. The Baha'i Distribution Service moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee. New titles were released, together with new editions of a number of important texts, as Baha'i Publishing prepared to meet the needs of a growing community. New accounting and financial systems consolidated the financial resources of the National Spiritual Assembly and improved fiscal management capabilities. The limited computer systems at the National Center were expanded to a center-wide network of workstations with efficient communications links to other Baha'i agencies. Access to community information has been streamlined, and the first of several dedicated applications has been created to assist in the coordination of services to the thousands of pioneers and travel teachers by a staff of just 4 people in the Office of Pioneering. The Offices of Community Administration and Spiritual Assembly Development were combined into one, preparing the way for a new phase in the maturation of local assemblies and the empowerment of individual initiative. The National Spiritual Assembly began the decentralization process within its own chambers, organizing its meetings around strategic issues over tactical and administrative matters. The process is proceeding on many fronts under one guiding principle enunciated by the beloved guardian, that the primary purpose of the administration is to serve as an instrument for the spirit of the faith. Voluntary associations have been developing steadily during the plan, helping to focus energies to generate new levels of activity in scholarship, health, social and economic development, the business and legal professions, the arts, media, and the new communications technologies. When viewed as a whole, these emerging processes capture some of the central defining energies of the 4th epoch of the formative age. The Baha'i Faith, progressing in its steady emergence from obscurity, is now increasingly recognized as an important world religion with a truly global membership. Yet, the Universal House of Justice has warned that without a massive expansion of the Baha'i community, the laboriously erected agencies of the administrative order will not be able to develop and demonstrate their inherent capacity to minister to the crying needs of humanity in its hour of deepening despair. The vitality of our faith, constancy in teaching the cause, rapidly evolving institutions, flourishing local communities. These are the basic requisites for advancing the process of entry by troops. This is the major task confronting the community of the Most Great Name as it enters the 4-year plan. The 3-year plan was a period of tremendous progress in the Baha'i world, and the community may rightfully rejoice in its many accomplishments. Yet there can be no doubt that it is but a prelude to the achievements that must await those heroic souls who arise with all of the power of the covenant to fulfill the glorious destiny foretold by the beloved Master, inviting the entire human family to the banquet table of the Lord, unfolding at last the divine promise of this century of light.